everyone, it's Pops with Bourbon Banter, and today we're going to do a review of Wild Turkey's Master's Keep. This is going to be hitting your store shelves in August of this year, and this is a very unique release for Wild Turkey for two reasons. First of all, it's the oldest release ever for the brand in the U.S. market at 17 years of age. They've released a 17-year-old on limited basis in Japan in the past, but never in the U.S. So this will be a pretty exciting release for those of you looking for older, rare expressions of Wild Turkey. The title of oldest expression in the U.S. previously was the American Spirit at 15 years. So this is one that you're definitely going to want to seek out if that's something that checks a box for you. But perhaps what I find more interesting about this, beyond the 17-year-old age statement, is the fact that this one is bottled at barrel strength, yet it's only coming in at 86.8 proof. That's right, 86.8 proof. So for those of you familiar with barrel strength bourbons, you hear numbers like 115, 120, 130, even higher in some cases. And even though Wild Turkey has a history of their barrel strengths, like Rare Breed, barely being around 110, 86.8 is a pretty big departure. And I even mistook when I got the sample that it was not barrel proof because of how low that was. And I guess it just goes to show you that I still have a little bit to learn. The story behind this and why it's at that proof was that this was originally distilled in '96. And it was put into barrels and put into a warehouse, but then Wild Turkey was running out of space. So 80,000 barrels of this juice were moved to the Stone Castle Distillery, also known as Old Crow, and put into brick warehouses as opposed to the traditional metal-clad ones that Wild Turkey has at their distillery and their warehousing space. So this was put there, brick warehouses, and down in a little bit of a valley, so a lower elevation. And as Eddie would keep an eye on these bottles, he noticed that it was aging different. The flavor profile was different. The proof, where the proof was adjusting over time, was different. And this was, attributed back to the fact that lower elevation, so it's a little bit cooler. The brick warehouses don't circulate air as well as the metal-clad ones. So it was a totally different environment for the bourbon. Well, Eddie continued to keep an eye on it, and shortly thereafter he noticed that there were some issues with moisture, some water damage, if you will, where the metal bands on the barrels were starting to rust. So they made a decision in 2003 and moved 80,000 of them up to higher elevation, but still, once again, in brick warehouses, and let them age there for about another 7 years, till finally in 2010, they were moved in their entirety back to the metal-clad warehouses that Wild Turkey uses for the majority of their bourbon. So at this time, I think it was about 13 or 14 years it had been aging. And while the profile was significantly different than what Jimmy would normally want to see, Eddie and he talked and discussed, well, it's different, but hey, this is kind of a nice way for us to show the effects of aging in different styles of warehouses in different climates. So they decided to forge ahead and ultimately put it into the Master's Keep release that we're experiencing right now. When it came out of the barrels, when it was dumped, it was about 89 proof, so it lost just 2/10 of a proof, or I'm sorry, a little bit more than almost 2.2%, or 2.2 proof, I should say, down to 86.8 as a result of filtering just when it was dumped, get rid of the charcoal. It should be noted this is a non-chilled filter product as well, so for those of you purists out there, you're going to appreciate that as well. It's going to go on sale once again in August. The suggested retail price is $150, and I think we need to keep in mind that this is a 17-year release for Wild Turkey. It is going to be something that collectors are going to seek out, and it's going to be priced accordingly. Wild Turkey love their products, love what they do. But when something like this comes along, they're definitely going to follow the market as they should, and they're going to price it accordingly. So it may be a little steep for some, but then again, you never know when you're going to get another expression like that. So that's my thoughts on it. It's purely based on the facts behind the bourbon, the reality of the current bourbon economics, if you will. But let's go ahead and find out what it tastes like, because obviously, at the end of the day, that's what really matters. I've sent a sample from the fine folks at Wild Turkey, and as you can see, I've gone through this. I've eked out about three and a half tastings, which I like to do. And in this case, I'm glad that I got to that third tasting. The first couple times that I poured this in a glass and started nosing it, I let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes. And quite frankly, 5 to 10 minutes, it wasn't very encouraging. It didn't really open up, and everything was muted, and I wasn't really excited about it. As I sat down to do this review today, I let it sit for about a half an hour, got involved in some other stuff. And when I came back, I was pleasantly surprised with how the nose had opened up and evolved. And as I dug into it this time, I immediately noticed a wonderful creamy mix of vanilla, caramel, and sort of a mutated grain into like a cocoa. So a kind of a nice earthy mix of the three of those, which is really delightful. In my case, was very surprising compared to when I had tried it before. There's a bit of toasted oak in the background. It has spent 17 years in a barrel, so not having oak would be stunning. But in this case, it's not prominent. It's definitely an undercurrent from a note. And then there's even a little bit, so you take it in deep, almost like a little bit of a caramelized sugar smell, if you will, sort of that bent chemically smell in the end of it, which fits quite well with the overall note. Should also note that it's got really nice legs on it. It's a nice color. It's been in the barrel a long time. I think I would have expected it to be a little bit darker, especially with the char level that Wild Turkey's known for and the amount of time in the wood. But when you look at the fact that this did not age and result in a high proof, I think it shows you how different the chemical reactions were in those barrels. And it's not unknown for Scotch to actually go down in proof over time. And this is sort of those rare exceptions where we see it in bourbon. And it's kind of cool. And I think, it should be noted that when this was put into the barrel, it was put in at 107. So it went from 107 to 89 and then finally down to 86.8. In terms of a taste, let's go ahead and check that out. What I find really, really kind of interesting about this is on the front, it's amazingly well balanced. The traditional Wild Turkey spice bite on the tip of your tongue is there. The sweet blend of vanilla and caramel is there. And even the toasted oak is there. And it's very, very well balanced. That being said, what it doesn't have, which I wish it did, was more of all those things. It's very pleasant, it's very nice, it's very sweet. However, it doesn't really grab me, if you will. What I really like, and what I've talked about before, is I like very intense vanillas and caramels and leather and dark fruits and things of that nature. And this one just doesn't quite go there for me. Don't get me wrong, it's very nice, but it tends to be light. The balance, it's silky smooth, it feels right. But for the taste for me, it just doesn't go deep enough, it's not intense. But that's my palate. I think for those who like a little bit older bourbon, especially with a little bit more wood influence, I think this is going to be right in your strike zone, and I think you're going to enjoy this quite a bit. As you move into the finish, you get that nice fade of the spice, the sweet and the oak. It's a little stringent for my taste. Once again, the older bourbons tend to have more oak tannins in them as a result of sitting in the barrel. And I think this one gets a little out of balance on the finish with that astringency. Then after you drink it, my first time I took notes, I was kind of like, oh, there's not much of a burn. And today, as I was updating my tasting notes, it kind of said the same thing. And then about 5 minutes later, suddenly the burns start kind of surging back. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I like that. So get past the astringency, the tanning elements, and the finish just come back with that familiar Wild Turkey spice and vanillas. And it's quite pleasant. So at the end of the day, this is clearly not something that Jimmy and Eddie set out to create. It's a happy accident, and Wild Turkey's had another one of those with their Unforgiven product, which was an interesting story, and one that myself and many other writers had a hard time, really trusting that that's really what happened. But when you sit down with someone like Jimmy, and who's known for shooting straight, and you hear his side of the story, and you hear it, and you say, okay, it happened. And clearly they're a business, and they're going to take advantage of that. I think here's a situation where happy accident, they kept an eye on it. Obviously, they had a lot of product, and they decided to bring it to market. Now, I can't speculate. I haven't talked to Eddie or Jimmy or anyone else there. But the question I always have is, if the market wasn't so hot right now, would this have come to market in this way? Would it have released as a 7-year-old thing? Jimmy, really likes his bourbons, 8, 10 years old, doesn't like to get past 12 a lot. So is this something that we're seeing as a result of the market? Would it have just sat there? Would it have been blended? Would it have disappeared to another brand being sold off if the economy wasn't what it was? It's not a question we can answer, but it's a curious one I have. But even though it's not quite in, my sweet spot where I would bunker down several bottles, it's a very good thing. I'm glad they brought it to market. I think a lot of people are absolutely gonna love it. I thought it would be fun to kind of compare this a little bit to a couple of the other things that Wild Turkey's put on the market. So we have, obviously, their Diamond, which was released for Jimmy's 60th, and then we got Rare Breed. These are the only ones I had bottles left in my house on. And so I poured the Diamond and went to taste it, and one of the things that I immediately noticed is the nose on the Diamond is a little brighter, a little fruitier, if you will. And the same thing can be said about the taste, the palate of it. Definitely fruitier. Get like a little bit of an essence of like a tea note, a little bit of mint. For all I know, some of the Master's Keep juice made it into this because this was a 13 to 16-year-old blend, so they could have put some of it in there. I don't know. But I think this one's got a little bit more fruit to it, a little bit more of a punch. I think the balance on the Master's Keep is better across it, but just the richer flavors in this one just edges this one up a little bit for me. And then, Rare Breed. This is one of my favorites. I could drink this all the time. Barrel proof, once again, this bottle specifically, 112.8, so this is low compared to other barrel proof brands on the market, but definitely toward the upper echelon for Wild Turkey. Jimmy's, one of his favorites obviously is Rare Breed. This is just a totally different beast. It's probably not even right to be comparing them, but since you're going out and you're going to be looking at where you want to invest your money, I think it's a fair way to do it. This one obviously has more heat on it, but just the nose on it, much more intense with those vanillas and those caramels and those darker fruits and things of that nature. And really screams the promise of that rich palate that I personally really, really get excited about. Yeah, this one just totally different place, and I think it's good to remember. For me, this is what I would feel comfortable reaching for day to day. It really hits my sweet spot, as I've said before. Richer flavors, more caramels, more vanillas. Even though that oak is there, it's really over nuanced by the other flavors, and has a depth to it that these other two really don't have. And it doesn't mean to knock them, but if you're like me and this is kind of flavor profile you like, this is gonna be much more rewarding. That being said, I'll go back to what I said. These are unique releases. They've done a really good job with them, especially when one of them wasn't planned. And if you're a fan of Wild Turkey and of Jimmy and Eddie's work, and I would definitely suggest that you invest and get a bottle if you can. 150 is not a small amount of money, but it's a collector's item at the end of the day. If you can buy two, great. Put one in your collection. Share one with friends is kind of unique. And if you happen to love bourbons, 16, 17, 18, 20 plus years, you're gonna like this one. There's no doubt about it. So go ahead and set your clock, set your schedule, and start sweet talking in your liquor store to get yourself a bottle of it. If you prefer richer, deeper flavors and you don't have the money, go ahead and buy a couple of these for the same price and you won't be disappointed either. So kudos to Eddie for watching this one for us, keeping it safe, bringing it to market. It's given us a great opportunity to try something a little bit different than what we're used to with Wild Turkey. And I look forward to the other releases coming out this fall. And until then, I wish everyone safe and happy drinking. Cheers.